There you go, pumpkin pie. Tucked in all nice and cozy now.
Daddy, could you read me a scary story? Pretty please?
Oh, I don't know about that, Snuggle Muffin. Your mom doesn't like it when I read you scary stories.
But Daddy, I promise it'll make me go to sleep better.
Alright, I can't say no to that face. How about I read you a classic then? How about scary stories to tell in the dark?
But Daddy, I wanted something that was actually scary.
Alright, you asked for it. Let's see. Where we left off here. Here we go. I gasp. What's he going to do? I tense up on my knees as he runs his fingers between my buttocks. Hush easy, he breathes close to my ear and kisses my neck as his fingers stroke and tease me. What's he going to do? His other hand glides down my belly to my sex, palming me once more. I'm such a good parent. Welcome, all you boys and ghouls, to another episode of Round the Clock Frights. I am Josh, and as you're about to see here in a second, we have a new setup for you here today. We were going to get a round table, but we actually don't cut corners. And we were going to be the frights of the round table, but instead, I guess we're just the frights. Joining me is Thor, Kimberly, and Brian, and today we're going to be talking about scary stories. But, despite what many of you might be thinking, this is not a video about Fox News.
I mean, it's not as scary as that, let's be fair.
Yes, let's be honest. But today, like I said, we're going to be talking about scary stories to tell in the dark, 2019 horror feature which was adapted from a series of books from the 1980s written by Alvin Schwartz, illustrated by Stephen Gamble. We just happen to have the whole trilogy right here with us. And a little bit of backstory on the books. Thor, you are our resident expert on the scary stories, so I'll let you give us a little history of them.
Absolutely. Like you said, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was originally kind of authored by Alvin Schwartz. And when I say kind of authored, is that Alvin Schwartz took a lot of urban legends that was already, spread about, just part of our story, a lot of archetypes, a lot of things that people heard from another person kind of thing. And he put them back into a storytelling format into his books. And the first one was published in 1981 with 2 sequels following pretty soon after. The thing that also made the book trilogy so amazing were these charcoal sketches that were done by Stephen Gamble. He was able to capture in a few strokes, and these are not heavily detailed illustrations, a lot of our deep-rooted fears. It just became something of a big deal. It was like one of the first horror anthologies for kids. It was marketed for kids, to kids. It was the 80s. We watched a lot of scary stuff. It also ends up, even nowadays, with everything else out there, it is still one of the top 10 most challenged books.
I actually do remember reading the Scary Stories books when I was in elementary school, and right off the bat, what really struck me about these books was just how over the top and gruesome they could be. It's not like nowadays where if somebody wrote a book like this for the ages 8 to 12, which by the way, that's what it says on the back of the book.
It's supposed to be for middle schoolers.
Middle schoolers. If somebody wrote something like this nowadays, you'd be hard-pressed to get 18-year-olds to read it.
Well, I mean, they were scary, but they weren't very, I don't see them being gruesome. I mean, it wasn't like blood, guts, gore, sex, drugs, rock and roll, violence, and that kind of stuff. It was urban legends. There's a lot of stories in here that you guys have probably already seen expanded into full-on horror movies or full-on suspense movies, like The Babysitter.
Yeah, just some examples. I mean, these were urban legends that many of us grew up with. You have the corpse that's missing the toe, and it comes back to find its toe. You have, like, the man with the hook, and the two teenagers in the car. They hear the scraping of a hook on top of their car. And then Kim and Brian, are you familiar at all with these books? Did you read any of them growing up?
I never did, no.
You never did? Kim, did you?
You can totally
I
borrow
did.
mine.
When I was in middle school, I actually read these books, and, to me it was like, how did you target these for 8 to 10-year-olds? Because they were pretty, they're pretty out there.
Yeah, I can't see.
So which one was your favorite story?
The Red Rum.
Ooh. I mean, based on what we saw, I can definitely see this giving nightmares to a lot of kids.
It was truly a horror anthology. It was not meant to be, oh, here's a couple of dark fairy tales. This is a horror anthology. If you want scary stories, you read, this is what you read.
So it basically seems like it was Stephen King's Nightmare and Dreamscapes for kids, basically.
Pretty much.
Well, yeah.
Pretty much. And I can't see a modern children's book like Captain Underpants containing a scene where a mother mixes a toe-in to some stew and then feeds it to her young son. I can't see that in something like
Well, like I said, a lot of the urban legends.
I mean, Captain Underpants has been frequently banned as well.
That's because of the underpants.
And now we have the movie adaptation. This is a movie that has been in the works for a while. It was kind of Guillermo del Toro's pet project. He's been throwing this thing around for years now, and he was planning to direct it for a while. And finally, he got it into production. He actually brought in another director to do it. The director's name is Andre Overdahl. I believe that's how you say his name.
And thankfully, this is one of Guillermo del Toro's passion projects that Hollywood actually has let him make.
Because
thankfully.
There have been so many Guillermo del Toro movies which haven't seen the light of day, like Pinocchio,
Hellboy 3.
Hellboy 3, rest in peace. But yeah, now going down the row, we'll start with Brian. What did you think of the movie adaptation? Did it capture, from what we've described, the essence of the books?
You know, it's hard for me to say, just, again, simply because I haven't read the books, but based on what you're describing, yeah, I would say it very much captures that kind of folklore, kind of campfire story, and I mean, obviously it has to take liberties with being a movie, and also it can't simply just be an anthology film, but judging it as a film, I felt like the way it worked some of these stories into the plot and whatnot, I thought for the most part was decently clever.
You thought it flowed very well, like the narrative?
Yeah. I mean, I got the sense of a story. I felt like this was a movie and not simply a collection of stories.
Yeah.
Kim?
Honestly, it brought me back to reading the book.
Yes. I don't want to mention that, but I'll let you give your thoughts.
I mean, like, it's been a while since I've read them, so I started forgetting a little bit of them. But once the movie was picking up, it just started all coming back to me, and it was like, I think it was amazing.
Yeah.
I do want to say, it brought some memories back of me being a child and reading these stories under the blanket at night with a flashlight.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It very much felt like that kind of movie, yeah.
Oh my god.
I was very pleasantly surprised by this film.
Pleasantly surprised. I think that's how we all felt. Thor, I know you've been dying to get
Oh my god, I have so much to say. Okay, so
without getting into the plot.
Not getting into the plot at all. The things that I really appreciated were that it kept the atmosphere from the books. You could feel, I mean, and you could tell that most of the people who were in there were fans. They'd read the book at some point, because as soon as there was a title that was shared, and we'll get into the plot more about how those titles were shared, you felt the entire audience go, and you could feel that, like, you're clutching at your blanket late at night and listening to the creaks of the house. The film work was very, very clever.
Yeah.
The cinematography in this movie was just stunning.
Oh my gosh!
It was really well shot.
I was
thinking that.
Like in certain shots, you just felt like you were there, like in the middle of autumn. Like they're like walking around like this dead cornfield, and there's like mist like in the background.
And then the thing that really stuck with me. Now, I love Guillermo del Toro as a director. I love him as a producer. Anytime he gets into something and it's a passion project for him, you can totally tell. I mean, take a look at The Devil's Backbone, the Hellboy series.
Shape of Water.
No, that's, I guess. But I would say more Pan's Labyrinth.
Agreed.
He has a very, very specific aesthetic, and I was wondering to see how he would marry that kind of fantasy aesthetic with this, which was really, really straight horror. And the thing that made me as a fan literally squee in the movie.
Yes, I can.
Was that
I can attest to this.
We can all attest to this.
yes.
Thor was like a fangirl at a Spice Girls concert. When I first saw the trailer for this movie, I wasn't entirely sure like what tone it would take. Like if they were going to be more family friendly. Like remember the Goosebumps movie that came out?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That was very cartoonish, like kind of over the top. You know, Jack Black gives a very silly performance.
It was pretty much along the lines of something like a Monster House or something like that.
Or
this was just straight horror.
Or was this movie, like you said, going to be more straight horror? Was it going to be more gruesome? Was it going to appeal to older audiences? And I can safely say it really found that tone. It reminded me of an 80s movie like The Monster Squad.
Rudy, question.
Shit.
No any virgin.
Okay, so one thing that I did want to say is that even though we were talking about how straight horror this was and stuff like that, and I've read these stories, I know these stories. And if you guys have been watching our channel at all, then you know that for pretty much this entire year, I've been really disappointed with horror movies, except for I think Us.
Crawl?
And then
You liked Crawl?
it was enjoyable, but it was entirely predictable. It was, you know,
Crawl is a B movie,
It was,
basically.
yeah, it was fun, but it wasn't necessarily all that great.
And then meanwhile, I'm taking Brian to see movies like Midsummer and Kim to movies like the Child's Play remake.
Yeah, thank
so
you.
we've been
Thank
having
you.
a good
I
time.
appreciate that
yeah,
you saved those for me.
I saw Child's Play. That was
But
actually
at the
decent.
same time, even with all of these things, I've been complaining about them being boring, uninspired, predictable. I knew what was going to happen. I was tired during it. You know, just I haven't been happy really with what this year so far, besides Us, has really offered. And yes, I do need to see Midsummer, but
Hey, don't knock
this-
47 meters down before you see it.
yeah. But with this one, even though I knew the stories and I knew what was going to happen, the tension was still there. The enjoyment was still there. The suspense was still there. So even though it was kind of predictable in a, like you guys were saying, fangirl kind of way, they were still able to build tension with me even though I knew how it was going to end.
So now we'll go ahead and get into the plot. Just so you are aware, we are going to be discussing spoilers because this is a movie that we're very excited to talk about.
Oh God, yes.
So to start from the top, it takes place in 1968, although at times it felt like they were trying to emulate the 80s.
Yeah, it did have that Stranger Things vibe.
Yeah, and then Thor, I'll let you go ahead and explain the plot.
So basically what you have is you have a group of friends who are out for Halloween. They bump into another person who is Hispanic, and part of the reason why that's important is because they definitely bring in that, as another moviegoer next to me said, that 1968 racism.
Brian said that.
No, it was the girl next to me.
No. The joke I made is that basically it's subtle that this movie ends with Nixon becoming president. Actually, there was an interesting political subplot going on with a Hispanic character, considering that, well, one of the big backdrops of this film is the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And I think what they said is that he was drafted and then he basically dodged.
Yeah.
He was a draft dodger.
He dodged. Sorry. My dog loves Kim.
So yeah, basically you had this group of kids, and I'm not gonna lie, like at first when they were introducing these kids, I was kind of getting a Stranger Things vibe. Like you have
Definitely.
A little bit, yeah.
You have, you know, these kids with different personalities. You have the main girl who's kind of an outcast. She loves to write stories. She's a bit of a loner. You have the quirky comic relief kid who's always saying terrible jokes.
His hair is basically the same as Dustin's. It's
is.
basically Dustin from Stranger Things.
Yeah, and then you have the ultra nerdy one who dresses up as a clown and keeps talking about how he's dressed up as a character from Commedia dell'arte.
Speaking of that kid who's dressed as a clown,
Augie.
I don't know
Augie.
if you guys have seen the movie Terrifier. Which is
Yes, I was thinking about that. I thought that's what he was dressing up as at first, and then I remembered it's the 60s.
So yeah, so these kids basically, they decide on Halloween night to go to this haunted house because they want to have an adventure. They find this book in the basement, and something that you really have to do with this movie is kind of suspend your disbelief, because it's adapting a book that was published in much simpler times, because the main girl, she takes the book, and I can see some audience members getting annoyed with that. Like, why is she taking this creepy book from this supposedly haunted house? You would think that she knows how dangerous it is. But it's harkening back to, like I said, a simpler time with these kind of stories about kids going up against these evil supernatural
because then there'd be no movie.
And you're right, there would be no movie.
The other thing is that the girl is obviously obsessed with Sarah Bellows, who's the character that is the book that wrote the book that she took. She's a writer herself. This is a piece of history. She knew the legends of Sarah Bellows. She was really in on it and was fascinated by it and everything else like that. So it's almost like, you know, fangirl goes into Graceland and sees Elvis's toothbrush just sitting there on the counter.
And then, throughout the rest of the movie, creepy shenanigans ensue. She has the book, which starts publishing stories in red ink.
Not red ink.
And blood. And so basically the rest of the movie, you have these sequences...
And catch up.
You have these sequences which are adapted from the short stories in the first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book. First up is Harold the Scarecrow, and I just want to say, all the sequences were very expertly crafted, but this one in particular, when you have the bullied jock kid walking alone at night through this dead cornfield, that actually got under my skin a little bit.
Yeah, no, because like there was times in the movie, like when she took the book, where you're sitting there anticipating, and you keep thinking she's gonna like basically get a paper cut and her blood was gonna sign over to like.
Oh yeah, no, I see it right there. Yeah, that her blood was what was gonna start it, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this Harold the Scarecrow sequence, it's our first indicator that this is going to be a slightly more adult movie than we were expecting, because this
got dark fast.
Yeah, Brian, you want to explain what happens to this jock character?
Okay, so basically, there's this scarecrow that Harold, and one night while he's out in the cornfields, this scarecrow comes to life and stabs him right in the stomach with his pitchfork, and from that stab wound, straw starts sprouting out, and then straw starts growing from his fingers, and his skin basically starts turning into straw, and he becomes a living scarecrow. And it cuts to black when we see a giant bundle of straw protruding from his mouth like this, suffocating him.
So I got a question for you, Brian.
Yes.
You've seen a lot of horror movies, and you were probably thinking he was going to get stabbed and he was just going to get killed, and that was it, right?
More or less.
How did this twist ending? How did that take you?
Where it took me was, oh, okay, so this is going to be much more of a fable than I was initially anticipating. This is also much more demented than I thought it was going to be.
When he turns into a scarecrow, it'd be like the werewolf transformation scene in American Werewolf in London, but with a scarecrow, because it was brutal. I was actually cringing in my seat.
It was painful. You could tell it was painful.
Haven't been this scared of Farm since Witness.
or Signs. The M. Night Shyamalan movie Signs. Yes.
So,
but I did love how detailed they were with it. Like with the scarecrow, you see the cockroaches climbing in and out of his eyes.
Oh, that's
or his
right.
mouth.
Yeah.
And I always wondered, because that's, like I said, they brought Gamel's vision to life. You always look at that, and the first thing you do when you see Harold is, why the hell do they have a scarecrow who looks like it was a mummified body?
Oh my god. That scarecrow was scary.
I do not know anybody who would hit. Oh my god.
It was the Donald Trump scarecrow.
No.
Don't insult that scarecrow like that.
But yeah, and practical effects with this scarecrow.
Oh my god.
And the rest of the movie is basically these kids trying to prevent worse things from happening. They're trying to prevent these stories from being told.
Or at least figure out why the ghost is doing this.
Yeah, and you get a handful of famous sequences from the book.
Oh yeah.
Another standout to me was a sequence where the girl has a red spot on her cheek.
This was the one that got me.
And I was waiting for it, and Kim, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, like, this scene, like, when I was watching it, I felt like I was watching, have you seen the Urban Legends of Bloody Mary?
Yes!
That's what it reminded me of when I was watching the scene where, like, basically what happens is she gets this spider bite in the beginning of the movie, and it ends up growing, and she goes to this dance rehearsal. She's in the bathroom trying to basically pop it like a zit, and then all of a sudden it gets to this like big bulging on her cheek, and you just see like the spider leg popping out of this bite, and then it was like all of a sudden just spiders just come right out of it, and it was.
To be honest, the other thing that scene was kind of reminding me of a little bit was Black Swan.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely a little bit. Yeah.
And also the scene where she like rips the hangnail off and it goes right all the way down to her knuckle.
Oh, stop.
Sorry. Some really terrible things happen to these kids, which again, bringing in that adult factor, there were some pretty gruesome sequences, like stuff that was even getting like under my skin, and I've seen a lot of stuff. We were talking about Urban Legends Bloody Mary.
Well, the scene that really got under my skin, honestly, was between the Red Room, because they definitely captured the feeling that you could not run. There was just no escape. Here it is. It's coming. It's coming. No matter what you do,
it was surrounding.
You cannot run.
We have to talk about the recreation of the Red Room. So, set up.
Oh my God.
The quirky comic relief has a dream in which he is chased by this pale, obese woman through this red room. And of course, his worst fears come to life, where they're in this hospital, and he's alone in this hallway that suddenly turns like bright red, and he's being stalked by Melissa McCarthy, who...
Dude, that's wrong.
Okay,
that's tasteless.
That's fair. But it's this grotesque woman who just appears out of the shadows and slowly walks toward him. We get kind of a Michael Myers vibe, where he's trying to run. Every corner he turns, she's just standing there. Yeah. And Kim, how does that sequence end?
Basically...
Oh my God. I know!
So basically she corners him into the middle. Both big blobs just right there, and all of a sudden just basically smushes him into her body, and he just disappears inside of her.
Get in my belly!
See, the thing that makes it, for me, a little bit scarier is the look on her face.
This dead smile.
She's just...
Yeah. Oh, that smile.
No, if you listen, as she's hugging him.
It's like a mother
pulling it in.
Child.
Yeah, it's like... And then she just totally subsumes him, and it's like...
God. And that's another thing to note too.
Clearly he has some big Oedipal issues.
See, that's another thing to note too, is this director's style, because this movie did have some jump scares in this, but in other sequences, like with the pale woman, you just have a terrifying creature walking slowly towards the camera. It was more about the build-up and the anticipation of it.
And the thing is that there was no...
God, the imagery.
As much as we talk about how dark it was and how violent and disturbing and everything else it was, there was no gore.
Not really.
There was no splash of blood. There was nothing like that. In fact, the only death that you really see is with the policeman getting his neck stabbed by the Jangle Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Honestly, though, like if we're talking about scenes that stuck out, and this is one we didn't discuss.
Okay.
To me, it was probably the toe.
Oh my God.
Okay, you got this kid who's basically afraid of the story that his dad tells him about the toe.
The
toe and the
okay,
stew.
so the story of the if you want me to.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, so the story of the big toe is from the first book. It is basically this kid is out digging in a garden and he finds a toe. He takes it to his mom, and his mom's like, "Oh, well, that's a really juicy, plump toe. Let's throw it into the stew." And don't ask. Like I said, some of this was back in Westward Expansion. I guess people ate dead bodies or something. I don't know. And anyway, so they eat the stew, enjoy it, and then in the night comes in this zombie-like woman asking where's her toe. Now, in the actual story, the way Alvin Schwartz writes it is that you are basically telling the story, and then it even gives you the instructions to jump to the person next to you at the high point, you know, that ratcheted up tension, jump on the next person next to you and go, you got it. So that's basic, from the book, the story.
And then Kim, that sequence with the corpse in the toe, did that get to you?
It really did. Like, he's sitting there and you know what's going to happen because she's reading it out loud through the book, and it's like, oh no, he's going to do it. And then he takes a bite of the toe, and it was like, there's a couple times I felt like I was going to be sick. I was like, oh my, oh, it's so gross.
I hate it when he started dry heaving.
So the rest of the plot, it basically comes down to like these two kids. You have the lead girl, and then you have the Spanish character, Ramon. They need to go back to this haunted house where she found the book. She gets dragged into a different time period where the family of this woman who is writing the scary stories, they basically kidnap her, put her in this basement where she is alone in the room with this really creepy looking ghost who basically tells her that in order to stop all of this, she needs to write the truth of what happened, which completes her arc of being a writer, and yeah, wraps things up in a neat little bow. So I would say, like, overall, this was a pleasant surprise for us. On the cons, I would say, like I was saying earlier, it felt like it was trying to imitate that 80s aesthetic where you have these kids with their different quirks, like the comic relief, and also, just me personally, I thought some of the plot points were a little bit typical, like that point in the movie where they have to go see this old wise woman who kind of looked like Donald Glover in a wig. They have to find out information from her about the supernatural entity. So some of it felt typical. Those would be the cons for me personally. Brian?
I thought some of the drama maybe was a little forced and maybe didn't have quite as much build-up as maybe as it needed. But part of that I feel like that's maybe kind of a natural side effect of them having to build one large story around all these kind of smaller stories. And in that regard, I think they did about as well as they could.
Kim?
The only con that I really had with the film was some of the moments that they had the comic relief in there. I felt like it was like too forced, forced and too cheesy.
I can agree with that a little bit, honestly.
Like when the comic relief character was saying stuff like, "I haven't even had sex yet." Kind of cringy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, not something, I don't know.
I would say that, a note on the clichéness of it, I would say that these were the books that kind of started the cliche in modern memory. So I can forgive the cliche of going and seeing the wise woman due to the fact that it is, you know, all the books are what we would now consider cliche. But I do have to agree with Brian and Josh about the storyline with the girl and her mother leaving. I thought it felt forced, and it wasn't necessarily. We didn't really get any details. It didn't move the plot along. It just felt like a subplot.
It felt like
that
window
was
dressing.
There. Yes. Felt
Yes.
like a subplot that was there to make us care about these characters.
Yeah, if I had one more con, there were a couple of unnecessary subplots, like the relationship with her father. Basically, her mother left them at a young age. She blames herself, which, by the way, the father was played by fan favorite Dean Norris, who played the SWAT team leader in Gremlins 2, and the SWAT team leader in Terminator 2, and Brian's favorite show.
He was the villain in Book of Henry.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Breaking Bad.
Yes, he was ASAP Hank Schrader from Breaking Bad, my favorite show of all time.
The Jangling Man is coming.
But yes, thank you so much, guys, for joining us. If you liked what you saw here, you can go and subscribe to our channel, Round the Clock Frights, for more horrific content. The next movie we'll be watching together as a group is Thor's most hotly anticipated movie of the year, 47 Meters Down Uncaged. Another killer shark movie. It's very original.
The annual one, I feel like.
So look for that very soon, guys. We're very excited about that.
And also anticipating the year's, what is sure to be the scariest film of the year, Cats.
Oh, Cats the musical, yeah. That looks scary as hell. But yes, thank you so much again, guys. Have a very Scary day, boils and ghouls, and we'll see you soon. And don't be expecting me to read 50 Shades Darker again anytime soon, because that was a one-time deal.
And please subscribe.
No children's mental health was harmed in the making of that, by the way. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
So thank you again, guys. Take care. Have a great night. Peace.
Bye.